In the world of celebrity, silence is usually louder than noise. And for the 7 days leading up to this moment, Cardi B had been terrifyingly silent. If you know Belcalis, you know that she lives her life out loud. She is the queen of the update, the master of the Instagram Live, a woman who processes her emotions in real time for an audience of millions. But for 1 week in 2025, the feed went dark. The stories stopped. The rants were replaced by a heavy, suffocating quiet that hung over the entertainment industry like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Behind the gates of her New Jersey home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Rumors had been swirling, vicious whispers in the blogs about her relationship with Stefon Diggs. They said the distance was growing. They said the schedules were clashing. They said that perhaps, just perhaps, the pressure of two superstars trying to merge their galaxies was finally causing a collapse. Cardi herself had been confiding in her sister, Hennessy, late one night in the kitchen, whispering that Stefon was moving funny. He was taking calls in other rooms. He was disappearing for hours at a time with vague explanations. For a woman who has battled betrayal in the public eye before, these were not just red flags. They were sirens. She spent those nights pacing the floors of her mansion, her mind racing through every worst-case scenario. Was he leaving? Was there someone else? Was this the end of the stability she had fought so hard to find? The silence wasn't peace. It was preparation for a war she thought was coming. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. The time was exactly 2:47 a.m. The house was still. The only light came from the glow of her phone screen as she scrolled mindlessly, unable to sleep. Suddenly, a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was Stefon. Her heart hammered against her ribs. At this hour, a text usually means only one of two things: a confession or a goodbye. Her thumb hovered over the screen, trembling slightly before she tapped it open. The message was short, clinical, almost cold in its precision. It read, "Wear something elegant, white silk if you have it. Be ready by 7 p.m. Don't ask questions." There was no heart emoji, no "I love you," no explanation. Cardi sat up in bed, the breath caught in her throat. Panic began to set in. Was he leaving? Was there someone else? Was this the end of the stability she had fought so hard to find? The silence wasn't peace. It was preparation for a war she thought was coming. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. The drive took 45 minutes, but to Cardi it felt like a lifetime. The SUV eventually slowed, turning off the main highway and winding through a series of security checkpoints that grew increasingly strict. They were entering a private terminal, the kind reserved for heads of state and billionaires who prefer to remain ghosts. When the car finally came to a halt on the tarmac, the scene that greeted her was surreal. It was completely dark, save for the runway lights and a single, massive aircraft standing in the distance. But this wasn't just a plane. It was a spectacle. Stefon had chartered a Gulfstream G650, the pinnacle of private aviation, but he had transformed it. The entire fuselage was wrapped in thousands of tiny, twinkling LED lights, making the jet look like it was draped in stardust. And there, printed on a massive silk banner draped across the boarding stairs, was a single word: Belcalis. Not Cardi B, not the Queen, but her birth name, the name her mother gave her, the name only the people who truly love her use. Cardi stepped out of the SUV, the wind whipping the hem of her white dress around her legs. She looked for Stefon. He wasn't there. She looked for a flight crew. There was no one. Just the open door of the jet, waiting like a portal to another world. She walked up the stairs, her heels clicking on the metal, her heart rate spiking with every step. When she crossed the threshold into the cabin, the smell hit her first. It wasn't the stale air of a plane. It was the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of 10,000 white roses. The interior of the jet had been stripped of its usual corporate coldness. The aisle was lined with pillars of flameless candles, casting a warm, flickering amber glow. The seats were covered in velvet. And the sound, there was no engine noise yet. Instead, a soft, acoustic melody was playing over the cabin speakers. As Cardi walked down the aisle, touching the petals of the roses that filled every available surface, the music faded and a voice filled the cabin.
It was a recording. It was Stefon. His voice was low, intimate, sounding like he was whispering directly into her ear. I know things have been hard. I know the world is loud. I know you question me. I know you have scars that I didn't cause, but that I have to help heal. Tonight isn't about money, Bocalis. It's about showing you the version of yourself that I see. Cardi collapsed into one of the velvet seats, bringing her hands to her face. The vulnerability in his voice was something she hadn't heard in months. The pilot's voice crackled gently over the intercom, breaking the spell just for a moment. Miss Almanzar, we are cleared for departure. Flight time is 3 hours and 20 minutes. Please sit back. Mr. Diggs has requested that you rest. The engines roared to life, a low hum that vibrated through the floor. As the jet taxied and lifted off into the night sky, Cardi looked out the window. New York City, the city that made her, the city that hardened her, shrank until it was nothing but a cluster of diamonds on black velvet. She was alone at 40,000 feet, suspended between her past and her future. She didn't know where they were going. The pilot had not announced the destination. She watched the clouds drift by, illuminated by the moonlight, and for the first time in weeks, the knot of anxiety in her chest began to loosen, replaced by a burning curiosity. 3 hours passed in a blur of anticipation. When the plane finally began its descent, the view outside changed. The harsh lights of the American Northeast were gone. Below her was nothing but the vast, inky blackness of the ocean, punctuated by the turquoise glow of shallow waters reflecting the moon. They were in the Caribbean. The landing was smooth, the wheels touching down on a runway that seemed to appear out of nowhere in the middle of the sea. This was a private island terminal. As the jet slowed to a stop and the engines whined down, the door opened, letting in the humid, salt-tinged air of the tropics. Cardi stood up, straightened her dress, and walked to the door. She was ready to face him. She was ready for the truth. But as she looked out onto the tarmac, she realized that the grand gesture on the plane was just the appetizer. The main course was waiting in the darkness, and it was bigger than anything she could have possibly imagined.
Cardi stepped onto the tarmac, the tropical humidity instantly wrapping around her like a warm blanket. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. Standing at the end of a long red carpet, flanked by tiki torches that flickered in the ocean breeze, was Stefon Diggs. He looked different tonight. He wasn't wearing the flashy designer streetwear the paparazzi were used to. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, crisp and sharp, looking more like a Bond villain or a CEO than a wide receiver. His hands were clasped behind his back. He wasn't smiling. His expression was intense, focused, almost nervous. Cardi walked toward him, her white dress flowing behind her. The silence between them was heavy, charged with everything that had been unsaid for weeks. When she reached him, she stopped. She looked up into his eyes, searching for a clue. "Stef," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is this? Where are we?" He didn't answer immediately. He simply reached out, took her hand, and kissed the knuckles. His hand was warm, steadying her shaking one. "I needed to get you away from the noise. I needed you to hear me without the world screaming in the background." He turned and led her toward a waiting golf cart. They drove in silence for 5 minutes down a winding path lined with palm trees, until they reached a massive set of double doors that opened into a glass-walled atrium. Through the glass, the moonlit ocean crashed against the rocks. Stefon stopped in the center of the room. He reached into his suit jacket. Cardi's breath caught. The moment was here. Every instinct, every romantic comedy she had ever seen told her a ring box was coming. She braced herself for a proposal. But Stefon didn't pull out a jewelry box. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. He handed it to her. The weight of it was substantial. "Open it," he commanded gently. Cardi frowned, confused. She flipped open the heavy leather cover. Inside were stacks of legal documents, stamped, notarized, and bound in blue backers. She squinted at the text. Deed of trust, transfer of title, irrevocable asset allocation. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Stefon, what is this? Are you making me sign a prenup? Is this a breakup?" Stefon shook his head, a sad smile finally touching his lips. "Read the name on the owner line, Belcalis." She looked back down. There, on every single document, typed in bold black letters, was her name, Belcalis Marlenus Almanzar. And under the section for co-owner, it was blank. "These aren't rental agreements," Stefon said, his voice gaining strength. "This is a title transfer. Everything you see around you, the land we are standing on, the structures, it's not ours, it's yours. I didn't buy this for us to share. I bought this for you to own." He took the folder from her stunk hands and set it on a table. Then he walked to a wall of curtains on the far side of the atrium. "He told you I wanted to protect you. You've spent your whole life fighting for what you have. You've always had to hustle. You've always had to worry that it could all be taken away if the music stops." He gripped the curtain cord. "I wanted to give you the one thing you've never had. Certainty." He pulled the cord. The curtains parted, revealing the view of the estate below, illuminated by floodlights that suddenly snapped on, one by one. Cardi gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Below them lay a sprawling $12 million oceanfront mansion built in the modern Caribbean style she had pinned on her vision boards years ago. To the left, a separate glass structure, a fully equipped commercial-grade recording studio. To the right, a warehouse-sized villa, visibly filled with mannequins and glass cases, a private museum for her fashion archives. And docked at the pier, bobbing gently in the water, was a 100-foot super yacht. The name painted on the stern was illuminated in gold light, the Forever Belcalis. Stefon stood behind her, whispering in her ear as she stared at the $50 million empire spread out before her. The house, the studio, the boat, the trust fund for the kids. It's all paid for. It's all in your name. Even if you left me tomorrow, even if you never spoke to me again, you and Culture and Wave will never struggle. You will never be homeless. You will never be broke. This is your safety net forever. For the first time in her life, the loud, boisterous Cardi B was rendered completely, utterly mute. She looked from the documents to the mansion, and the reality of what he had done hit her like a physical blow. He hadn't bought her a gift. He had bought her freedom. And that realization was about to break her wide open.